Chapter 595. Open it. The old man gestured. Everyone saw that after Lin Buoheng opened the seal, there were 50 jammed bottles in the upper layer of the box. Those bottles were even exquisite, as if every single one of them was meticulously made. The old man went forward and picked up a bottle to take a look. His sharp eyes saw that at the bottom of the bottle, there was a special pattern engraved. He couldn't help but be startled. He waved his hand and said, "Laroa, look at the pattern on this bottle. Doesn't it look familiar?" Hearing this, Lin Laroa went forward and took a look. Other than seeing that the bottle was exquisite, he also felt that the pattern at the bottom of the bottle was somewhat familiar. He couldn't help but frown and think for a while. It does seem like I've seen it somewhere before. As he said that, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. He slapped his thigh. That's right. He hurriedly took out a drawing. On it was an exquisite bottle, and at the bottom of the bottle was a pattern. Comparing the two, the father and son both trembled. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. Seeing their reaction, the people around them were puzzled. They asked, "What's familiar? Have you seen this bottle before?" However, the father and son didn't say anything. They picked up a few more bottles and looked at them. When they saw the same pattern at the bottom of the bottle, they couldn't help but be stunned. They said in disbelief, This isn't a dream, right? Big brother, is this box of medicine really sent by the people of the Phoenix dynasty?" Lin Laroa suppressed the shock in his heart and couldn't help but ask. "Yes, what's going on? Is there a problem with this medicine?" Looking at the two's expressions, why were they so strange? Lin Laroa swallowed his saliva and tried to use a calm voice to ask, "Big brother, elders, have you heard of a pharmacist called the Ghost Doctor?" One of the elders said, "We have heard of him. It's said that the medicine this person refines is extremely precious. It's a priceless item in every big country. This person is rumored to be a legend. He's more than a legend. There are very few medicines that he can concoct, but every bottle is extremely precious. There are many old monsters who are stuck in their cultivation, but as long as they use one of his advanced medicines, they will be able to break through their bottlenecks and successfully advance. Every bottle of his medicine is priceless. Even if someone offers an astronomical price, they might not be able to buy it," he said excitedly. Looking at everyone's expressions, he only felt that he was unable to calm down. At this moment, even the patriarch was so excited that his body was trembling slightly. His face was flushed red, and his eyes shone with excitement. This time, we saw a bottle of the Ghost Doctor's advancement medicine being auctioned off at the black market's auction. We went to take a look, and all the old monsters from the various clans and powers were mobilized to fight over that bottle of advancement medicine. The final price of that bottle of advancement medicine was shockingly high. Lin Laroa continued, "Father wanted to bid for it, but the price was too high and he couldn't get it. But later on, I found a way to get the Ghost Doctor's special pattern. Look, it's this. It wasn't easy for me to get it." Everyone was stunned and couldn't react for a moment. And then, what does this have to do with these medicines? Only Lin Buoheng and Lin Chengji, father and son, were shocked. They suddenly took a big step forward, picked up the bottle of medicine and compared it to the pattern on the drawing. With this comparison, the pattern was exactly the same. Looking at it, the two of them were shocked and their eyes widened in disbelief. Chapter 596. What? The elders and the others gathered around when they heard this. However, before they could get close, they were stopped by the old master. "Everyone, stand still." Once the old master's voice rang out, everyone instantly stopped. Their bodies stiffened as they looked at the old master, then at the bottle in his hand, then at the blueprint in Elder Lin's hand. They wanted to say something, but under the old master's gaze, no one opened the bottle, and no one moved. The entire hall instantly quieted down. What kind of mess is this? What if the medicine spills on the floor? The old master said exasperatedly. Glaring at everyone, he said, "Everyone, return to your seats." Yes. Everyone's faces flushed. Realizing that they had lost their composure, they lowered their heads in embarrassment. After replying one after another, they returned to their seats, each pair of eyes landing on the old master. Seeing that everyone had returned to their seats, the old master coughed lightly and said, "Although the bottle of this medicine is the same as the ghost doctor's special bottle, the medicine inside is not clear. After all, there are over 100 bottles of medicine here. If it really is the ghost doctor's medicine, then it really is no small matter." His voice paused, and his sharp gaze swept across everyone. Everyone here today heard it. "Keep it to yourselves. Don't even mention it to your women and children. If this really is the ghost doctor's medicine, once the news gets out, it will bring disaster to our Lin family. However, as long as we use it well, this can be an opportunity for our Lin family to rise to the next level." Towards the end, his voice trembled slightly. Everyone looked at each other, nodded, and replied, "Yes, we know. We definitely won't leak it out." Millimeter. The old master nodded and asked, "Boss, when they sent the betrothal gifts, did they say what medicine it was?" Lin Boheng shook his head a little shamefully. "I thought it was just a normal medicine, so I didn't care and didn't ask. The ghost doctor's medicine has many types, and each one is different. Big brother, are these two levels the same? Have you opened them to take a look?" Lin Laroer said, his gaze landing on Lin Boheng. "Then open the lower layer." "Seriously, you didn't even ask about the betrothal gift." The old man glared at him and motioned for him to open the upper layer. Lin Boheng did as he was told. When he opened the top layer and revealed the bottom layer, he saw a piece of paper inside. He picked it up and looked at it, then excitedly handed it to the old man. "Father, look, it's all written here." The old man took it and looked at it. His hands trembled slightly, and his face turned red with excitement. "Good, good, good. This is great. This is great. Ha 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 ha. Old master, what does it say?" An elder asked. "It's written here that there are 50 bottles of advancement potions in this box. In addition, there are 10 bottles each for external and internal injuries, as well as antidotes. There are a total of 100 bottles of potions, all of which are made by the ghost doctor," the old man said excitedly, his face full of disbelief. "How did they get so many potions? Just these 100 bottles of medicine alone are incomparable to the 100 boxes of betrothal gifts. This is too extravagant. My Lin family is blessed. Ha 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 ha." Seeing his grandfather's happy and excited expression, and then seeing the elders, his father, and his uncles talking excitedly, Lin Chengji thought for a moment, looked at everyone, and said a little rudely, "That, grandfather, these are the betrothal gifts for aunt. When I heard you talking about that girl called Fengjiu, her appearance." The old man paused and didn't say anything else. Once Lin Laroer was reminded, something seemed to flash across his mind. He was immediately shocked. Could he be the ghost doctor? When these words were said, the hall fell silent. Lin Boheng said with some astonishment, "Ghost doctor? How could this be?" Although that Feng girl liked to dress up as a man in red, she was only 15 or 16 years old. How could she possibly concoct such a high-grade advancement medicine? That's impossible. Chapter 598. Everyone in the hall widened their eyes in shock. If this was true, then wouldn't they become in-laws with the ghost doctor? Thinking of this, each and every one of them was so excited that their faces flushed red. Their excited emotions were like rolling waves that slapped their hearts, stirring up thousands of waves. Lin Chengji was also startled. After a while, he asked, "Grandfather, father, do you think we should call all the younger generation of the clan back from the academy?" Hearing this, everyone was startled. After thinking for a while, they understood the meaning behind his words. They all slapped their thighs and cheered. Call them back, call them back." An elder couldn't help but laugh. "Sushi is getting married. How can these younger generation not come back?" Yes, they have to come back. There's still time now. Later, send out the message and have them all rush back to attend Sushi's wedding. That's right. How can we not have them come back for such a joyous occasion? No. There are many disciples in the clan. If they all come back, there will be too many people. Just have the direct descendants who are 16 years old and above come back. The men and women don't need to come back. Lin Buoheng was stunned when he saw how excited the elders were. When he saw that the old man was smiling but didn't say anything, he couldn't help but glance at his son with a strange expression and let out a dry cough. This, I think. Let the clan's disciples take this opportunity to visit the Phoenix dynasty and get closer to the Feng girl. However, I don't recommend having other thoughts. Speaking of this, Lin Buoheng brought out the aura of the head of the clan and said, firstly, the Feng girl is the princess of the Phoenix dynasty. Secondly, let's not talk about whether she is the ghost doctor. Just based on her way of doing things and her aura, not to mention the younger generation, even our generation is inferior to her. Thirdly, father and second brother, you don't know, but the elders do. The black-robed man who came with her last time is the master of the Yama Palace, the Yama Lord. His relationship with the Feng girl is not ordinary. Letting our clan's disciples get close to her will only backfire. Hearing this, everyone gradually calmed down. After analyzing the pros and cons, they looked at each other in unison and nodded. Then when it's time to send off the bride, let the young disciples of the clan go with them. Let them see the world and don't think too much about it. Also, regarding our guesses, it's enough for you to keep them to yourselves. You absolutely cannot speak of it. The old master spoke and gave everyone a warning look. After everyone respectfully answered yes, the old master gestured and said, all right, go do what you need to do. Disperse. Yes, we'll take our leave first. Everyone bowed before dispersing. Changji, Lin Buoheng called out to his son. Father. He turned around and looked at him and the old man sitting at the head of the table. You're the next candidate for the head of the family. You have to think twice before you speak. You're the eldest grandson of the eldest son. Every word you say represents the Lin family. You can't make any mistakes, Lin Buoheng warned in a deep voice. Chapter 599. He waved his hand. Yen, you may leave. After dismissing everyone, he chatted with the old man for a while before leaving together. 2 days later, Fengjiu and the others returned to the Phoenix dynasty. After handing over the matters, she returned to the Feng manor to cultivate in seclusion. The matter of sending the betrothal gifts had been settled, so there was no need for her to do anything else. As for her grandfather, she had already prepared the medicine for him to advance to the next level. It all depended on what level his cultivation could reach. After taking care of their matters, she had to cultivate in seclusion as well. At that time, her grandfather's wedding ceremony would definitely be very lively. Before that, she had to raise her strength again. If she couldn't break through her spiritual power, then she would cultivate her profound power. She focused on cultivating in the space and didn't pay any attention to the outside world. During this period of time, the wedding invitations were sent to the kings of the surrounding 9 countries. Some of the clans in Yunyu City also received invitations. As the time drew closer, more and more people from the various countries arrived. Half a month before the wedding, the Lin family was led by Lin Buoheng. They personally sent his sister to a prepared residence in Yunyu City. Lin Sushi's brothers and the younger generation of the Lin family also accompanied them. They came in a flying ship. Everyone in the city knew that it was the Lin family for the retired emperor's wedding. Although they were curious, they couldn't peek. This was because there were several nascent soul cultivators accompanying them. Normal people couldn't get close to them. At the same time, in Fengjiu's space, she, who was sitting cross-legged in cultivation, had already entered the realm of gazing at self. She had forgotten the time and place, and had even forgotten her grandfather's big day. At this moment, her entire body was filled with a strong profound energy aura, and it was circulating in circles around her body. She originally had a profound spiritual body. After her meridians were opened, her cultivation speed was much faster than others. In addition, she had the space that contained the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as a place to cultivate. With the help of medicine, her cultivation speed was naturally extraordinary. Recently, she had been concentrating on cultivating in the space. Her profound power level was also very fast. Now, she had already reached the initial stage of the martial ancestor realm. Even so, she didn't plan to stop. She wanted to break through the martial ancestor realm and enter the martial emperor realm. However, ever since she had entered the martial ancestor realm, the speed of her cultivation had clearly slowed down. It was as if there was an invisible force obstructing her, preventing her from advancing any further. Because of this, she had drunk a bottle of medicine. However, she had only managed to reach the peak of the martial ancestor realm. She could not cross the final threshold no matter what. Thus, she stopped cultivating her profound energy and started to meditate and practice martial techniques. She repeatedly practiced various martial techniques in her mind until she seemed to have fallen into a state of exhaustion and was unable to continue meditating. Only then did she stop. Whew! She exhaled softly, retracted her aura, and slowly opened her eyes. The moment she opened her eyes, the aura around her seemed to have changed again. It was an extremely subtle change that only the little fire phoenix, who had been sitting not far away and staring at her while eating ginseng, noticed. "Here's one for you to replenish your vitality." A tender voice sounded. A ginseng was thrown to her. She took out a silver ribbon and tied up a small strand of her hair. The rest of her hair fell naturally behind her back. It was simple and imposing, but it did not lose its elegance. She went to the wardrobe and chose a white dress with silver cloud patterns embroidered on the collar, sleeves, and hem. After tidying it up, she walked out of the room. The maidservants had already laid out the food on the table. The chubby little fire phoenix was already sitting there and secretly drinking wine. Looking at little fire phoenix's flushed face, she was slightly stunned. "You're secretly drinking wine?" "No." The moment the little fellow saw her, he immediately denied it. However, the fragrance of wine all over his body and his flushed little face couldn't lie. Chapter 601. The little guy didn't think much of it. He was of the fire attribute and the wine was strong. The ginseng was also an item that could replenish vitality. Even if the two of them were added together, it wouldn't be a problem for him. At most, the flames in his body would only increase a little. "Mistress, this is the information." Lung Shuang walked out and placed the things in front of her. After glancing at the little fire phoenix, he stood to the side. Feng Jiu ate while flipping through the information. Other than the person's information, there was also a portrait of the person in the information. Thus, she could tell at a glance who the person in the information was. The meal took about 2 hours. After she finished flipping through the information, she passed it to Lung Shuang and asked, "Is the carriage ready? Call them up and let's enter the palace together." "It's ready. They're waiting outside the residence." "Millimeter," she replied and pulled the little fire phoenix with one hand as they walked out. When Luo Yu and the others saw the little fire phoenix outside, their expressions changed slightly. They had seen this child once before. He had suddenly appeared and disappeared. They didn't expect him to appear in the residence again. "Greetings, mistress." The 8 of them returned to their senses and respectfully bowed. Feng Jiu glanced at them and ordered, "After entering the palace, you will receive the wind palm guards. Lead each small team and patrol the palace. During this time, don't let any accidents happen." "Yes." The few of them replied and watched as she brought the child who had obviously gained a lot of weight into the carriage. Only then did they follow the carriage to the palace. At this time, in the imperial palace, the monarchs of the surrounding small countries and their accompanying princes were all staying in the palace. They could move freely in the palace. Therefore, the young princes could often be seen gathering in some rockery, pavilions, or flower forests. Drinking tea, tasting wine, admiring flowers, and chatting about beauties were the things that these princes talked about the most when they got together. But recently, they talked about the princess of the Phoenix dynasty, Feng Qingge, more often. "I heard that the princess of the Phoenix dynasty has a beauty that can topple cities, and her elegance is unparalleled. It's just a pity that she doesn't usually live in the palace, but in the Feng manor. We've been in the palace for a few days, but we haven't seen this princess even once. I really want to know, is she really as beautiful as the rumors say? According to what I know, not only is she pitilessly beautiful, her methods and aura are also extraordinary. Before she became a princess, She dared to reject the marriage proposal of the Qing Tang Kingdom's crown prince. Such courage is not something that ordinary girls possess. After coming here, I really want to meet this princess called Feng Qinga. A well-dressed man casually said as he played with the cup in his hand. That pair of feminine eyes flashed with a wolf-like sharp light. A trace of interest flashed across his eyes, and an interested expression appeared on his face. That's right, I really want to meet her. However, there's no need to rush. On the day of the Phoenix dynasty's retired emperor's wedding, she will definitely appear. The other prince also said. Compared to the feminine prince, this prince was more of a strength type. Not to mention his appearance, just his sturdy body gave people a feeling that he had a lot of explosive power. Since there's nothing to do in the palace, why don't we go out and play together? One of the princes looked at the others and suggested. Chapter 602. I didn't think that there would be such a beauty in the palace. Look, that girl is really beautiful. He gestured for everyone to look. Everyone followed his line of sight and saw a woman in white walking slowly not far away. Her white robe fluttered in the wind, and her figure was exquisite. What attracted their attention the most was her beautiful face. It was truly a peerless beauty that could topple cities. Even the princes who were used to seeing beauties couldn't help but have their eyes light up. A stunning light flashed in their eyes. This girl's temperament is outstanding. Her clothes are simple but elegant. Her face is beautiful. She's probably Feng Qinga. The feminine prince sized up Fengjiu not far away and made his judgment. When everyone heard this, they had different expressions. She's the princess of the Phoenix dynasty. With such beauty, it's no wonder that even the crown prince of Qingtang fell in love at first sight. She's so beautiful that people can't take their eyes off her. Just now, you said that you didn't have the chance to see her. Now that she has appeared, it's really fate. Since that's the case, why don't we invite her over for a gathering? She's the host, so she naturally can't neglect us guests. What do you all think? The young but scarier prince asked with a smile. His gaze was fixed on Fengjiu not far away. When everyone heard this, their eyes lit up. Of course that's good. It's our honor to have such a beautiful princess accompany us, isn't it? As they spoke, they all smiled and walked over. They planned to block Fengjiu's path and invite her to the pavilion. Fengjiu held on to Little Fire Phoenix and walked into the palace. Behind her was the black-clothed Leng Shuang, while Luo Yu and the rest went to the Phoenix Guards. Those people keep staring at you. Little Fire held on to Fengjiu with one hand and followed beside her with his short legs. He looked at those people with displeasure. They should be the princes from the neighboring countries. Don't worry about them. She didn't even look in their direction and continued walking. She planned to enter the palace to see how her grandfather's cultivation was going. She didn't plan to waste time with those people. But they're coming. As Little Fire Phoenix spoke, his eyes darted around. No one knew what he was thinking. Just as he finished speaking, the 7 or 8 men came in front of her and blocked her path. This must be the princess of the Phoenix dynasty. I didn't expect to see her so soon. It's a pleasant surprise. A prince said with a smile. His eyes wandered over the beautiful Fengjiu, and he did not even let Leng Shuang, who was standing behind her, off the hook. I've heard that the princess of the Phoenix dynasty is devastatingly beautiful. Now that I've met her, I know that seeing is believing. Your Highness, the few of us are drinking wine and admiring the flowers over there. I wonder if the princess would be willing to do us the honor? Another prince said as he looked at Fengjiu aggressively. Leng Shuang, who was following behind Fengjiu, had a cold expression. Especially when she saw them looking at her master with such disgusting eyes, her murderous aura shot out. However, her master didn't say anything, so she couldn't be impudent. She could only suppress the urge to kill. Chapter 603. She lowered her eyes slightly and looked coldly at the hand in front of her. When she raised her eyes again, there was a smile in her eyes. Her eyes curved into crescents as she revealed a harmless smile. Her gaze swept past the sturdy man in front of her and looked at the people beside him. She smiled and said, "Princes, Do you really want to have a gathering with me? When everyone saw her revealing a woman's gentleness, they all laughed in their hearts. She was only a 15 or 16-year-old girl. With so many of them blocking her way, how could she leave calmly? At that moment, someone laughed and said, "Princess is the host. No matter what, you should be the host, right?" "That's right. We met Princess here and wanted to invite Princess to admire the flowers and wine in the pavilion. We hope Princess won't decline. If Princess doesn't like wine tasting, you can accompany us to walk around the palace. As long as Princess keeps us company, we will also like it," another prince said as he stared at her with a burning gaze. Looking at those wolf-like gazes landing on her, as if she was a harmless lamb waiting to be slaughtered, the smile on Feng Mao's face deepened. She glanced at these people, then her eyes turned and she shook her head. "What fun is there in drinking wine and admiring flowers? I don't like that." "Oh. Then what does Princess like?" that feminine prince asked as he stared at her with a sharp gaze. He felt that this princess of the Phoenix dynasty was nothing more than this. She glanced at that person and said with a smile on her face, "When I'm free, I prefer to exchange pointers with others." Hearing this, everyone had different expressions. They didn't speak for a while and just stared at her. "If princes are interested, I'm very willing to exchange pointers with you. I just don't know if you have the guts." She raised her eyebrows slightly as she looked at them. Didn't they want her to accompany them? She could accept it, but did they have the guts? When everyone heard her words, the first thought that came to their minds was that the princess of the Phoenix dynasty was said to have extraordinary skills. With this question in mind, they sized her up with their gazes. No matter how they looked, they couldn't imagine what was so scary about this delicate girl. In addition, after being provoked by her words, the proud and arrogant princes were naturally unwilling to say that they didn't have the guts, so they all agreed. "Why wouldn't I? We are more than happy to have the princess spar with us." "That's right. I've long heard that the princess's skills are extraordinary. This emperor also wants to experience it. Ha ha ha, I've long wanted to meet Her Highness. Naturally, I wouldn't miss this opportunity." The 7 princes laughed arrogantly, not thinking that this woman's strength was above theirs. One must know that they were able to follow their father here, so they must be the most outstanding among the princes. How could they be afraid of a mere woman? Since she said she wanted to spar, then they could take advantage of this opportunity to dampen the prestige of the Phoenix dynasty. In a fight between men and women, if there was any contact that shouldn't be there, it could only be attributed as unintentional. How could they let go of such an opportunity? However, just as their hearts were filled with excitement and anticipation, they saw the beautiful woman frown slightly. A trace of distress appeared on her face as she shook her head. Chapter 604. Forget it. What do you mean forget it? Just when they were looking forward to exchanging blows with her, they heard her say forget it. How could she forget it? Everyone fell silent as they stared at her in astonishment. Their mouths were so wide open that you could stuff an entire duck egg into them. Especially when they saw the look of hesitation on her face, as well as the look of victory on her face, it made them even angrier. Little Fire Phoenix, who was being held by Fengjiu, rolled her eyes. She knew this woman was going to trick them. Exchanging blows with her? These idiots in front of her really wanted to beat her up. "Princess, do you think you're inferior to us, so you dare to do it?" "That's right. Princess, you're looking down on us too much. Do you think we'll complain to our imperial father if we lose to the princess? Exchanging blows will not harm anyone's life, so it won't affect the diplomatic relations between the two countries. Princess, you can rest assured." "That's right. Moreover, how did the princess know we'd lose? Exchanging blows with each other, maybe we accidentally hurt the princess." Seeing everyone talking, the feminine prince didn't say anything. He only stared at Fengjiu for a long time before saying, "If your highness really has some misgivings, why don't we sign a spar guarantee? Whether it's the princess or us, we'll be exchanging blows of our own free will. Even if we accidentally injure each other, we won't pursue the matter. How about it? Millimeter, this little emperor thinks this is a good idea." "That's right, This little emperor also agrees. That's right, sign the guarantee. This will save us a lot of trouble. Hearing everyone's agreement, they all stared at her, waiting for her to speak. Fengzhou smiled, revealing a harmless and pure smile. Of course, this way, this princess won't have to worry. Just as she finished speaking, Leng Shuang had already taken out a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone from his space and held it in front of Fengzhou with both hands. Fengzhou picked up her brush and wrote down the rules of the competition in a flamboyant manner. Both parties were willing to participate in the competition. If there was any accidental injury, there would be no investigation, and it would not damage the diplomatic relations between the two countries. Finally, she signed the 3 words Feng Qingge and signaled for the others to sign as well. Everyone stepped forward and took a look at it one by one. Thinking that it was feasible, they signed their names one after another. After Fengzhou put away the paper, a smile appeared on his face. After glancing at them, he led them to the martial arts field. At this moment, the 7 or 8 princes were filled with excitement and anticipation. They wanted to take advantage of her during the sparring and show off their might, but they didn't know that they had already fallen into the trap that Fengzhou had dug for them. Due to the gathering of people from various countries in the palace, the Phoenix Guards and Protectors increased their patrols. In the past, there would be many people training here, so the training field was empty. Seeing that there were only a dozen or so protectors around the training field, the feminine prince looked at Fengzhou and asked, "How does the princess want to spar?" Fengzhou glanced at him and signaled for the little fire phoenix to stay by Leng Shuang's side and not run around. She then walked up to the competition field and stood on the stage looking down at the princes below with a smile. This princess still has matters to attend to and doesn't have time to delay for too long. It's quite time-consuming to have all of you come here one by one. How about this? All of you come together, it's simple, convenient, and fast. Hearing this, the 7 or 8 princes below were furious. 1 against 8. She really dared to say that. Chapter 605. Seeing this, Fengzhou smiled and said, "That's fine too. If you want to stop the spar, you only need to admit defeat." Admit defeat? Hehe, princess really knows how to joke. That prince sneered and cupped his hands in greeting, please. As soon as his voice fell, he did not show the courtesy of a gentleman and directly attacked Fengzhou. Fengzhou's lips curled slightly. The opponent's attack was too slow in her eyes and was full of openings. If she did not want to take advantage of this opportunity to take care of them, she really would not have bothered to make a move herself. The palm wind in front of her eyes was aimed at her. She moved her feet slightly and dodged to the side. Her hands did not move and she only raised her leg to attack. She quickly kicked towards the back of the other party's knee. That prince who was unsteady sucked in a breath of air in pain. His knee could not withstand the force and his entire body was thrown forward, almost falling to the ground in a sorry state. He turned around and saw that she did not even move her hands and only used her leg. He could not help but be furious and feel humiliated. He angrily asked, "Why didn't you make a move?" Fengzhou blinked. Her face was full of good intentions, but the words she said made him tremble in anger. This consort only needs to make a move with her leg. If this consort makes a move, I'm afraid that the prince will not be able to withstand it. You. His anger continued to rise. He no longer treated her as a girl. Circulating the profound energy in his palm, he suddenly rushed forward and sent a fierce palm strike towards her neck. Unexpectedly, Fengzhou raised her leg and kicked. Her foot was filled with profound energy, and although it seemed weak, it contained a hidden force. The kick struck the area between his thumb and forefinger. His hand went numb and the profound energy in his palm was instantly dissolved. He only saw her fly out and send out a spinning kick. Peng, 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 peng. Several kicks landed on his body. Hiss. He cried out in pain. He lost his balance and staggered backwards. When the people below saw this, their expressions slightly changed. Another person jumped up. "I'll take on Her Highness the Princess." As soon as his voice fell, the prince who had leapt into the air swept out with his leg. It was a kick that could sweep away 1,000 soldiers. However, When Fengzhou's kick hit an acupuncture point on his inner thigh, an unbearable numbness attacked him and he immediately fell to the ground in a sorry state. His legs were tightly clamped together, and he wanted to reach out and rub that sore and numb place, but because it was close to his crotch, he didn't want to be rude in front of others, so he forcefully endured it. For a moment, he could only be seen twisting left and right, secretly gasping for air, and even his expression became strange. "Your Highness, are you all right?" Fengzhou asked kindly with a face full of concern. After some thought, she added, "Actually, I didn't use much strength in that kick. It shouldn't hurt that much." That prince's face was red as he held his breath. He could not even speak. It didn't hurt, but the numbness was as if millions of ants were gnawing on him. The numbness seeped into his bones, causing goosebumps to rise all over his body. It was simply more unbearable than the sharp pain. Seeing that the two people who went up on the stage were defeated in one move, the faces of the people below were a bit ugly. They only felt that the strength of the two princes was too weak. They couldn't even take that kind of move. It was simply a disgrace to them. The remaining people looked at each other and continued, "Princess is indeed skilled. In order to prevent us from ending up like those two princes, we won't be polite." As soon as their voices fell, they jumped onto the stage and stood around Fengzhou, trapping her in the middle. Chapter 606. Hearing this, Fengzhou smiled and swept her gaze across them. "All right, if I can't win, I'll definitely admit defeat. But you guys have to be careful." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure flashed out and her palm struck towards a prince in front of her. Her speed was so fast that the prince didn't even have time to dodge and was hit in the eye. Bang! Hiss! That prince sucked in a breath of cold air and suddenly retreated after being hit by that fist. The pain from his eye made him unable to open his eyes and he only felt a burning pain. Such fast skills. "We won't hold back then." A person's voice rang out and several figures instantly attacked Fengzhou. The attacks came from all directions and every move was ruthless. They didn't plan to leave any leeway. They only wanted to teach this arrogant princess of the Phoenix dynasty a lesson. However, the corners of Fengzhou's mouth curled up when she saw them make a move. She circulated the profound energy aura on her body and her speed was several times faster than before. Her white figure flitted past them and one could faintly hear the sound of fists landing on the ground, accompanied by miserable cries of pain. Hiss. Ah. Mn. My eyes. Hearing the painful cries from the stage, the guards guarding the martial arts field quietly turned their heads to look at the stage. When they saw 7 or 8 people attacking their princess on the stage, they all shook their heads inwardly. That was their Phoenix dynasty's princess, the master of the Phoenix Guards. Not to mention that there were only 7 or 8 people besieging her, they had seen more than 10 people besieging her and not injuring her at all. On the contrary, everyone was ruthlessly taught a lesson in the end. Those princes were really bold. They wanted to fight with their master and didn't even ask around. They were really asking for a lesson. Watching the scene on the stage, below the stage, Little Fire Phoenix fished out a ginseng from his bosom and asked while biting it, "Do you think they'll lose a layer of skin?" Lung Shuang slightly lowered his head and glanced at him. "Even if they don't die, they'll lose a layer of skin." If it weren't for the fact that they were the princes of other countries who had come to attend the old master's marriage, just the fact that they dared to stare at their master with such impudent eyes was enough for them to die 100 times. "Yeah, I think so too. Moreover, I was beaten up for nothing." The little fellow nodded and looked at those people sympathetically. He felt that these people were so stupid that he was speechless. How could such a person be a prince of a country? It was obvious that no matter how much their country wanted to develop, it was impossible. The two of them watched from below. In less than half an incense stick's worth of time, they saw a few people with bruised noses and swollen faces. Their faces were filled with fear, and when they opened their mouths to shout out the word "I," they were sent flying by a punch, interrupting their words of surrender. "Yes." With a pained grunt, the prince covered his mouth and stared in shock at the innocent-looking Fengzhou. He opened his mouth but was unable to say anything for a long time. He looked at the people beside him and saw that they were all bruised and swollen, with bruises around their eyes. Some of them even held their stomachs and retreated to the side. Seeing this scene, the prince swallowed his saliva and stretched out his hand. I admit defeat. Chapter 607. The few of them immediately pounced forward after circulating their profound energy, wanting to grab hold of her legs and body, trapping her before teaching her a good lesson. Even the feminine prince and the burly prince no longer cared about their faces. Because they had been beaten up by Fengjiu until their heads were swollen like pigs, their hearts were filled with shame and anger. They only wanted to teach her a lesson, so they pounced forward as well. When Fengjiu saw this scene, she stared blankly for a moment before breaking into laughter. Princes, if you don't want to spar, you can just admit defeat. Why are you acting like fools? This is too disrespectful. Who knew that it would have been better if she had not said this? Once she said this, their faces turned ugly and their faces turned black. Admit defeat. They don't want to admit defeat. She had clearly not even given them the chance to admit defeat. Didn't they see that the prince who had admitted defeat was beaten every time he tried to speak? He had even been kicked off the stage. They were princes of a country after all. How could they really lose face like this? Furthermore, they did not believe that so many of them would not be able to defeat her alone. At this moment, they no longer thought that their foolishness was even more shameful than admitting defeat. Seeing this, Fengjiu did not want to play with them any longer. Furthermore, when she saw their bruised and swollen faces, her anger dissipated. After all, they were here to attend her grandfather's wedding, so she naturally could not go overboard. Hence, when she saw them pouncing over, she immediately kicked them off the stage. Some of them were kicked on the shoulders and rolled off the stage. Some of them were unlucky and were kicked on the face. There were also some who were kicked in the stomach and were sent flying. Hiss. Ah. One by one, they rolled off the stage as groans of pain rang out. The princes who were originally dressed in bright and splendid clothes were now in a sorry state. Their faces were bruised and swollen, looking extremely comical. They crawled up from the ground. Their previous drive had been completely thwarted and there was even a faint trace of reverence that came from their fists. Although they were a little arrogant, they knew in their hearts that Feng Qingge was able to fight against 8 people by herself because of her excellent skills and cultivation. It was only at this moment that they understood why she dared to refuse the marriage proposal from Qing Teng's crown prince. Why she dared to oppose Murong Bo when she was the only one left supporting the Feng manor. In addition to her skills and cultivation, she was also much more cunning than them. She caught them looking down on her and dug a hole to teach them a lesson. To put it nicely, this was a spar, but to put it bluntly, it was the price for their impudence. They were rushing forward to let her beat them up for nothing. Thinking of the guarantee that they had signed earlier, each of them felt so sullen that they were about to burst into flames. She had been scheming against them for a long time, and they had been so proud of themselves, looking forward to taking advantage of her during the sparring session. Who knew that before he could take advantage of her, he would be severely taught a lesson. Everyone, this competition is over. This consort won't be playing with you anymore. If you still don't have enough fun, feel free to continue here. This consort will be leaving first. Chapter 608. Fengjiu, who had left, had planned to see her father first. However, she heard from the Feng Wei that her father was chatting with the kings of other countries, so she went to find her grandfather first. However, she did not find him in his palace. After asking around, she found out that he had gone to a bamboo forest in the palace. Take little fire to Leng Hua and then walk around, she instructed, indicating for Leng Shuang to take little fire to Leng Hua's side. Yes. Leng Shuang replied, looking at little fire phoenix. The little guy glanced at Fengjiu and left with Leng Shuang without saying anything. It was Fengjiu's first time in the bamboo forest in the palace. Because she did not live in the palace often, she had only heard of this place. Today was the first time she had stepped into this place. After walking for a while, she saw the green bamboo in front of her eyes. When the faint bamboo fragrance filled the air with the breeze, her entire state of mind also calmed down. She walked slowly. Perhaps it was because her state of mind was calm, but at this moment, She actually thought of Shenyuan Mose, who had been away for more than 2 months. After so long, he should have returned to the empire, right? The 1,000-year-old cold poison in his body had not been cured yet. Those suppressing pills would not last long. After returning, would there really be an alchemist who could refine an antidote for him? She thought of the bottle of his blood in her space. After her grandfather's wedding, she would take some time to study it. She did not believe that with her talent in medicine and poison, she would not be able to cure the 1,000-year-old cold poison. When she arrived inside, she saw an old man dressed in grey sitting cross-legged on a large rock in the forest. His eyes were closed as he cultivated. Perhaps it was because he had advanced to the martial emperor realm, his originally silver-white hair had gradually turned grey. His face did not look as old as before. Instead, he looked 10 years younger than before. In the end, he still did not break through to the martial venerable realm. Well, to become a martial honor in such a short period of time, even with the help of medicine, was not an easy task. Unfortunately, she was still lacking in the field of alchemy. Even though she wanted to refine the rejuvenation pill, she still needed to deepen her understanding of alchemy. Perhaps sensing her arrival, the old man slowly opened his eyes. When his gaze fell on Fengjiu, his eyes were filled with love. "Little Feng, why are you just standing there quietly?" Fengjiu smiled and walked forward. "I want to see when Grandpa will notice me." He, Grandpa will know once you enter the bamboo forest." He smiled and gestured for her to sit on the big rock. He asked, "I heard from the Phoenix Guards that you were cultivating in seclusion. When did you come out?" As he spoke, his gaze swept over her body. When he saw that she had already entered the martial arts grandmaster realm, he could not help but be slightly surprised. "You're already a martial arts grandmaster?" To be able to become a martial arts grandmaster in such a short time, her talent was truly astonishing. Fengjiu smiled and nodded. She came to his side and sat down. She did not hide her cultivation, so he could naturally see it. However, he could only see the cultivation of her dark force. He could not see the cultivation of her spiritual qi. "I wanted to break through to the martial arts grandmaster realm, but I was stuck here. So, I didn't cultivate. I planned to wait until later." She smiled and looked at him curiously. "Grandpa, when Aunt Sushi came here, did you secretly go and take a look?" Chapter 609. Under his granddaughter's gaze, the old man revealed an embarrassed smile and could only say, "I haven't secretly gone to take a look, I only went to find Big Brother to drink a few cups of wine." "All right. I won't tease grandfather anymore." She couldn't help but gently smile as she said, "I came today to see how grandfather's preparations were going. Seeing that you're in good condition today, I'm relieved." "Yuan, grandfather is doing well, don't worry." The old man smiled as he looked at her. His heart was filled with joy. After all, he never thought that he would marry again at this age. In 2 days, grandfather's big day will be. These two shouldn't cultivate and should rest well, she warned, worried that he would cultivate too much and be too busy before the wedding, causing his body to not be able to take it. I know. Grandfather knows." He narrowed his eyes as he nodded. As if he thought of something, he said, "That's right, Fenglas. The Lin family seems to have guessed your identity as the ghost doctor. If it wasn't for Big Brother mentioning it that day, grandfather wouldn't have known that you added 100 bottles of medicine to the betrothal gifts. The betrothal gifts were all arranged by them. His son didn't tell him and he didn't ask. After all, he had told him not to be disrespectful, but he never thought that the betrothal gifts would be so generous that it would shock him. Especially those 100 bottles of medicine. With Feng Lassie's ghost doctor name, every bottle of medicine she refined was priceless, but she had refined 100 bottles in such a short time as a betrothal gift. When he found out about this, other than being shocked, he was also moved. She had already arranged everything and gave him enough face. How could he not be moved as a grandfather? Hearing this, Fengjiu revealed a smile. "Grandfather is getting married, so your granddaughter should also give a gift. I don't have anything else, but this medicine, I can refine it. You." He shook his head and looked at her lovingly and dotingly. Other people's treasures were hard to come by, but she could casually refine them. If people knew that the famous ghost doctor was his granddaughter, this threshold would be flattened by people who wanted to propose marriage. Fengjiu chatted with him for a while and told him about how she had just met those princes and took the opportunity to teach them a lesson, which made the old man laugh heartily. In the end, seeing that it was getting late, she left first to find her father. However, no one expected that the princes, who were covered in injuries, would be summoned by their father before they could even return to their residences. In Feng Xiao's palace, all the monarchs gathered together. More than a dozen monarchs of small ninth-ranked countries came as well. After chatting for a while, they said that they wanted to call their sons to come and pay a visit. In fact, it was just a gathering for the princes of the various countries to see who was the most outstanding among them. Some of these princes were gathered together, while others were not. Thus, other than the 8 who had been beaten up by Fengjiu, there were 6 or 7 who had been cultivating in their own rooms. When those 6 or 7 came to pay their respects, they sat behind their father. Each of them was dressed luxuriously and had an outstanding temperament. However, just as everyone was talking and laughing, a guard reported that the other princes had also arrived. Everyone in the main hall smiled and looked towards the door. Feng Xiao, who was sitting at the main seat, smiled and ordered for them to be quickly invited in. Chapter 610. What's going on? One of the monarchs stood up furiously and glared at his son who walked in. To be able to bring his son to the Phoenix dynasty, he must be the most outstanding among his many sons. He originally wanted to show everyone his son's bearing and elegance, but who would have thought that he would come in with a swollen face? What's going on with you all? Could it be that someone dares to lay a hand on you in the Phoenix dynasty's palace? Another monarch also spoke in a deep voice. The moment he released his aura, the entire hall felt the atmosphere solidify. When the others heard that monarch's words, they did not speak again. They only looked at their son with a swollen face and suppressed the anger in their hearts. They had really lost all face. Only a few of the monarchs had smiles on their faces. After their dignified gazes swept past the 8 people, they continued to sip their tea. They did not need to care. The one who was humiliated was not their son. In comparison, the princes of the other countries were nothing more than this. The princes sitting behind their father also had a look of surprise in their eyes. After being in the palace for a few days, they had met these people before, but they did not want to be in the same group as them. They did not expect to see all of them with swollen faces today. They were really curious. How did they end up with such injuries on their faces? It was too unsightly. At this moment, the 8 princes who walked in did not feel good either. Their faces were burning, but they did not know if it was due to embarrassment or pain. When they heard their father's summons, they even specially went back to change their clothes before coming. Otherwise, they would look even more miserable now. However, after losing face in front of the monarchs and princes of the other countries, they were a little embarrassed to meet others. Thinking that they had signed a guarantee, they could only swallow this matter in their stomachs. Otherwise, if they knew that the injuries on their faces were caused by the princess of the Phoenix dynasty, they would probably be even more embarrassed to meet others. It was originally 8 against 1, but they still lost in the end. They lost so badly that they could not even raise their heads. After exchanging glances with each other, the few of them bowed to the various monarchs in unison. Only then did the effeminate prince speak. It's like this. The few of us gathered together and had nothing to do, so we wanted to spar a little. However, we didn't expect that we would go overboard and end up with injuries all over our faces. We really shouldn't have made Imperial Father and the various monarchs worry. Hearing this, the others hurriedly stepped forward and said, yes, we shouldn't have done that. It was just a spar, but we didn't expect to be so heavy-handed. We didn't expect it to be like this. Hearing this, everyone in the hall had different expressions. To be able to become the ruler of a country, they were naturally all shrewd people. Their words could only deceive others. It would be strange if they believed them. However, was there such a person in the palace who could teach them a lesson and make them help cover it up and not dare to say it out loud? They did not expect it. However, Feng Xiao, who was sitting on the main seat, glanced at the princes and coughed lightly. He took a sip of tea and covered the smile on his lips before speaking. Sparring is beneficial for the improvement of one's strength. In the past, the princes lived in their own countries, and it was extremely difficult for them to meet. To have this opportunity to spar, you will definitely benefit a lot. Hearing this, the 8 of them lowered their heads slightly and responded vaguely. Chapter 6:11. With the announcement of the princess's arrival, everyone in the hall turned to look. The princess of the Phoenix dynasty could be considered a legendary figure. First, her identity was stolen and she was disfigured. Then, she returned to take back her identity and took over the Phoenix token. Then, she broke off the engagement with Murong Yixian. When the Feng Manor was in trouble, she supported the Feng Manor by herself and no one dared to offend her. She was fancied by the crown prince of Qingteng, yet she dared to refuse the marriage and forced a marriage in front of the Feng Manor. The moment she acted, Qingteng's guards were utterly defeated. In an instant, she took the lives of the generals and dared to let the blood of the invaders splash in front of the Feng Manor. She pulled down the previous ruler, Murong Bo, personally pushed her father onto the throne, changed the dynasty's name to the Phoenix dynasty, and personally went to a third-tier country's Lin family to send the betrothal gifts to her grandfather. All of these were not things that normal women could compare to. They were curious about the princess of the Phoenix dynasty. Rather than saying that they were here to attend the wedding of the retired emperor, it was better to say that they were here to meet the princess of the Phoenix dynasty. They brought their most outstanding sons here for a reason. They wanted to see the princess of the Phoenix dynasty and get a feel of her. Then, they would see if they could talk about the marriage. The Phoenix dynasty was rising. If this princess was as outstanding as the rumors said, they naturally hoped that they could get this outstanding woman for their son. As for whether it would succeed or not, they were not worried. The matters of the young people were left to their own devices. Trying was still necessary. Even if the chances were slim, what if it really did succeed? Different from their father emperor, the princes that had been taught a lesson by Fengjiu instinctively stood to the side when they heard the princess's arrival. They felt that they were still a bit conspicuous standing there, so they all went to sit behind their father emperor. The other princes noticed their strange actions and were slightly surprised. Their thoughts turned and they looked at the entrance of the hall. They saw a white-clothed woman slowly walk in. She did not have anyone accompanying her, but she was neither haughty nor servile. Her steps were light and calm as she walked in. The moment they saw the woman, the eyes of the young princes lit up. Her peerless beauty was one thing, but the most important thing was the incomparably noble aura she exuded. Her white dress fluttered in the wind, and her ink-black hair fell behind her back. She was elegant and unhurried. They only saw a faint smile on her beautiful face. The mysterious look in her clear eyes raised her beauty to a whole new level. It wasn't the gentle beauty of an ordinary woman, nor was it the cold and frosty kind of beauty. It wasn't the kind of beauty that was hot and alluring. The space between her brows emitted a dazzling expression like the blazing sun, and there was a trace of laziness in her expression. Her actions exuded confidence and calmness, and it was a kind of unrestrained carefreeness that came from her bones. It had the indolence that belonged to a woman, but it also had a calmness that was not inferior to a man. It was truly breathtaking and unforgettable. Fengjiu slowly walked into the hall. His gaze casually swept across the crowd in the hall. When he saw the few people sitting behind their imperial father with their heads lowered and half of their faces covered, a smile flashed across his eyes. These people actually came here. How interesting. Chapter 6:12. The various monarchs sized her up, and the smiles on their faces deepened. Even their tones became gentler, no longer as cold and stern as when they were lecturing their sons. Hehe, I've long heard that your highness is outstanding. Seeing you today, I realize that the rumors are not even a tenth of the truth. That's right, reaching the martial ancestor realm at the age of 16. Such talent is truly rare. Compared to your highness, us princes are really too unremarkable. The various monarchs laughed as they spoke. The moment they saw Fengjiu, they had already decided that no matter what, they had to build a good relationship with the Phoenix dynasty. With such a talented and outstanding daughter, in addition to Feng Xiao himself, Old Master Feng, and the Lin family of a third-rate powerful country, how could they still be on bad terms with the Phoenix dynasty? And when their imperial father said that Feng Jiu was a martial ancestor realm cultivator, the 8 princes who had their heads lowered, not daring to let Feng Jiu see them, suddenly raised their heads. They were stunned and angrily glared at the elegant and beautiful woman, their hearts filled with anger. She was actually a martial ancestor realm cultivator. How could she be a martial ancestor realm cultivator? A martial ancestor realm cultivator actually had the nerve to spar with them, who were only at the martial grandmaster realm. She was too brazen and shameless. They all angrily glared at the woman who was smiling and talking to their imperial father. At this moment, her actions were graceful and magnanimous. Where was the pure and innocent expression she had when she was trying to lure them into a trap? This was simply a harmless little white rabbit on the outside, but in reality, she was a cunning jade-faced fox. Just as they were angrily glaring at her, they heard their imperial father's laughing voice. They were so shocked that they hurriedly hid the anger on their faces, sat down properly, and lowered their eyes to listen. "My sons, it's rare for you to come to the Phoenix dynasty, and Her Highness is so outstanding. You must seize this opportunity and ask Her Highness to give you more pointers." Hearing this, the 8 princes who were lowering their eyes secretly gritted their teeth in anger. They had already been given pointers. Wasn't the bruises on their faces caused by her? However, they didn't dare to disobey. They could only reply, "Yes, we will remember Imperial Father's instructions. We will definitely seek Your Highness for guidance." When Feng Jiu heard this, he smiled and said, "I don't dare to give advice. If the princes don't mind, this prince is very willing to exchange some pointers with you." When she mentioned the word spar, her smiling eyes fell on those people. There was a smile in her eyes that only they could understand. "Ha ha ha, good, good, good. With the princess's words, we can rest assured." All the monarchs laughed heartily. From their point of view, they could exchange pointers with Feng Jiu. Firstly, they could receive her guidance. Secondly, they could get closer to her. There were only benefits and no disadvantages. Only the 8 princes could not help but touch their faces after hearing her words. They felt that the wounds on their faces were hurting again. After a while, the crowd dispersed, leaving only the father and daughter pair in the main hall. Feng Xiao looked at her with a smile and said, "How did those people offend you? You've actually taught them a lesson to the point where it's hard for people not to notice them." Feng Jiu smiled and came to his side. She held his arm and sat down. "When I entered the palace, they stopped me and asked me to accompany them to drink wine and admire flowers. I said that drinking wine and admiring flowers were boring, so I brought them to play something more interesting." Chapter 613. Thus, Feng Jiu told him how he made them sign the letter of guarantee, which made him laugh out loud. In the next 2 days, Feng Jiu stayed in the palace and helped to entertain the kings of the various countries. As for the wedding, they asked Old Man Gang and some of the elders in the palace to make arrangements. They were very busy. To their surprise, Guan Shilin finally rushed back to Yunyu City the day before Old Man Gang's wedding. On the 13th day of the 12th lunar month, in the morning of the wedding, 3 firecrackers were set off in front of the palace. 12 cultivators flew out of the imperial palace on their flying swords. On each of their flying swords stood a young palace maid with a flower basket in her hand. They were all wearing pink dresses and had light eyebrows. Each of them was delicate and pretty, very pleasing to the eye. The cultivators on the swords brought them to the sky above Yunyu City and sprinkled the wedding candies that they had prepared. Deafening sounds of firecrackers were also heard in the sky above Yunyu City. They were like dazzling fireworks before scattering below Yunyu City. In that instant, if one looked up, they would see the sky above Yunyu City filled with firecrackers like fireworks. The palace maids sprinkled the wedding candies from the sky, causing the adults and children of Yunyu City to be very happy. After the 12 sword-controlling cultivators sprinkled the water twice, they returned to the top of the palace's main gate. At this time, a majestic wedding procession was setting off from the main gate. The dazzling red color made the entire wedding procession exude a festive atmosphere. Old Master Feng, who was dressed in a festive red robe, rode on Old White's back. In addition to the big red flower ball tied to Old White's front, there was also a big red flower ball tied to his body. Today, he looked very energetic and had a joyful smile on his face. Behind him was a palanquin with 8 people. Behind the palanquin were 8 palace maids with baskets of flowers in their hands. As they walked, they sprinkled fresh flower petals. The sound of flutes and drums was joyous. It attracted the attention of the adults and children in the city as they followed the procession to the bridegroom. When the old man went to the wedding procession, Feng Xiao and Feng Jiu stood on the roof of the palace and watched from afar. Feng Xiao couldn't help but smile emotionally. Seeing the old man get married, I actually feel like I'm watching my son get married. Haha. Hearing this, Feng Jiu couldn't help but laugh out loud. There was a smile in her eyes. She joked, "It turns out that I'm not the only one who has this feeling. Father actually has it too. Ha ha ha, let's just talk about this here. We can't let the old man hear this. Otherwise, he'll definitely scold us." Feng Xiao laughed loudly. He felt this way because his family hadn't held a wedding in a long time. Especially since the one holding the wedding was not his daughter but his father. Naturally, he would have this strange feeling. While the father and daughter were chatting as they watched the wedding procession from a high place, the Lin family was also bustling with excitement. The bridal sedan is almost here. How's Sushi's preparation? Lin Buoheng walked in and saw that the room was bustling with activity. Some people were carrying this and some were carrying that. Chapter 614. Amidst the tension, the sound of a sedan chair arriving came from outside. Thus, Lin Buoheng came to Sushi's side. "Sushi, Sanyuan is here to pick you up. Big brother will send you to the sedan chair." "Thank you, big brother." Under the bridal veil, Sushi was as beautiful as a flower as she softly said. Lin Buoheng bent down, carried her on his back, and personally sent her to the sedan chair. After a series of ceremonies, the wedding procession majestically went to the palace after picking up the bride. The Lin family also went to send the bride off and went to the palace together. The commoners in the city followed them all the way until they arrived at the palace gates. They watched as the Emperor Emeritus dismounted from his horse, personally kicked open the sedan chair door, and led the bride into the palace. It wasn't until the newlyweds' figures disappeared that everyone reluctantly left. Because the wedding procession circled around the city, it wasn't early anymore. However, they calculated the auspicious time and arrived at the Lin family's residence to pick up the bride. Then, they brought her back to the palace. After this, it was already past noon. When the newlyweds entered the palace, paid their respects to the Feng family's ancestors, and were sent to the bridal chamber, the wedding banquet outside had already begun. Perhaps it was because Feng Jiu had taught them a lesson, or perhaps it was because the monarchs of each country had given them instructions, but the people of each country got along peacefully at the wedding and didn't cause any problems. This made Feng Xiao secretly relieved. During the wedding banquet, Feng Xiao was responsible for entertaining the monarchs of each country and the princes. Old Man Geng and Guan Shilin were responsible for entertaining the family heads of each family. Feng Jiu was responsible for entertaining the people of the Lin family and also met the younger generation of the Lin family. The old man came out to entertain the guests during the banquet. He toasted table after table. Today, he couldn't hide the smile on his face. The smile that came from the bottom of his heart made everyone happy for him. After all, he was the Emperor Emeritus. Naturally, no one dared to cause trouble in his bridal chamber. Thus, after toasting everyone, the old man left first. Everyone drank until late at night before going their separate ways. That night, after the hosts, Feng Xiao and Feng Jiu, sent everyone off, the father and daughter looked at each other and smiled. Feng Jiu looked at her grandfather's palace and smiled slyly. "Father, they've all left. Do you think we should go and mess around in grandfather's new room?" Upon hearing this, Feng Xiao was slightly stunned. Then, he couldn't help but laugh. "Go back and rest. Don't make trouble. Otherwise, you'll scare your grandfather and the others. As he spoke, he yawned and said, I've been busy the whole day. I'm going back to rest first. You should hurry back too. As he spoke, he left without waiting for her reply. His footsteps were slightly quick, as if he was afraid that she would say something that he could not answer. Looking at her father's fleeing figure, she turned her gaze and rubbed her chin, muttering to herself, will he be scared? Sigh, forget it. Tonight is Grandpa's big night. I'd better not go and cause trouble. She chuckled and then turned to return to the palace. The next day, around 7 a.m., Feng Xiao and Feng Jiu came to the main hall to serve tea to the old man and Su Shi. This was a cup of tea that acknowledged her as part of their family. It was a cup of tea to the elders. Father, mother, please drink tea. Feng Xiao respectfully served tea to the two of them. He felt a bit awkward when he called out his mother. After all, the person he called mother looked like his daughter. One could imagine how sullen it was. Chapter 6:15. The old man and Su Shi looked at each other with a smile on their faces. After drinking his tea, Su Shi gave him a gift. Then Feng Jiu served them tea and also received the gift that Su Shi had prepared for her. The few of them chatted for a while in the palace before Feng Xiao left first. Because today all the kings of the various countries were leaving, he had to make arrangements to send them off. Feng Jiu stayed behind to chat for a while and then left. Because after her grandfather's wedding, she planned to go to the Peach Blossom Cove to cultivate in seclusion and wait for the enrollment day of the 6-Star Academy. Big brother and the others are going back today, let's go send them off. Su Shi looked at the people around her and said, her face overflowing with a happy smile. After waiting for so many years, she finally got the result. Naturally, she was full of joy. Okay. Old Master Feng replied and accompanied her to send them off. Before the two people's wedding, people from all over the world came and it was very lively. After the wedding, everyone returned to their own places. Even Guan Shalin once again went out with the black market mercenaries to gain experience. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, 3 months passed. In the Peach Blossom Cove, the old man who was sweeping the floor heard the sound of a furnace exploding. He could not help but look towards the alchemy room. This was the 42nd time this month that a furnace had exploded. The people from the black market had been very busy recently, and were all busy delivering alchemy furnaces to her. Cough cough. Feng Jiu's body was pitch black, even her hair was burnt by the flames from the alchemy furnace. Her hair was slightly curled up and emitted a burnt smell. Her face was grey and her hair was disheveled. She covered her mouth and nose as she ran out of the alchemy room. When she arrived at the courtyard, she took a deep breath and frowned. She said to herself, this is not right. I clearly controlled the fire very well, how could the furnace explode? What is wrong? Could it be that the amount of 100 withering grass was too much? Thinking of this, she ran into the alchemy room and took out a new alchemy furnace from her space and began a new experiment. However, 4 hours later, another rumbling sound rang out. This time, the pill furnace wasn't destroyed. Instead, a fierce stream of air rushed out from within the pill furnace. With another rumbling sound, the pill furnace's spiritual ingredients were all destroyed. Another failure. The cauldron didn't explode this time, and it's not because of the large quantity of 100 withering grass. Then, the only explanation is that the medicinal properties repel each other. She sat cross-legged in front of the pill furnace. Her entire body was black, and she was deep in thought. Her eyes were filled with determination. For the past 3 months, other than concocting medicine for the black market to auction, she had been researching alchemy. However, she hadn't expected that she would be unable to refine a level 3 life essence pill even though she had already refined a spirit herb that could trigger heavenly lightning. She couldn't help but wonder if she had really been lucky when she had refined the pill. I don't believe it. Her eyes were resolute as she tried again. Under the peach blossom tree in the courtyard, the old man sat quietly and looked at the courtyard where the alchemy room was located. 4 hours later, when he didn't hear any more explosions, he slowly closed his eyes and sat there like an old monk in meditation. It wasn't until another 2 hours later that he heard the laughter of the woman in the courtyard that he opened his eyes and slowly turned around to leave. In the alchemy room, Feng Jiu was laughing. He was happy that after failing dozens of times, he had finally succeeded in refining the life essence pill. Chapter 616. In her palm, there were 2 long-sized pills, one dark red and the other black. These 2 pills didn't even have pill veins on them, but they exuded a strong medicinal fragrance. She didn't know if they were useless pills, but whether they were poisonous or not, she didn't know because their colors were completely different from what was written on the pill recipe. The pill furnace didn't explode, the spiritual herbs weren't mixed up, and there's also a medicinal fragrance wafting out, but how did they become 2 strange pills? This kind of medicinal pill is definitely not the life essence pill. It can only be used to make the life essence pill. She was also confused. She had clearly followed the pill recipe to refine the pills, without making any mistakes in the steps or using the wrong ingredients, but how did she manage to refine 2 strange pills that even she didn't know what they were? She took the 2 strange pills to the side and took out the large collection of pill recipes from her space to carefully compare them, but she couldn't find any clues. Finally, she used a silver needle to test whether the 2 pills were poisonous or not. After testing them with the silver needle, they were still silvery white. She could only remember the refining steps, method, and dosage of these 2 strange pills. She put away the 2 strange pills and continued to refine them. Although they weren't life essence pills, they were still pills, weren't they? So, she tried to refine the pills again. She tried to change the pill recipe and added some spiritual herbs that she felt were desirable. This experiment took another half a month. Over the past few days, she had long forgotten her original intention of refining the life origin pill. Due to her repeated failures, she had tried to change it again and again. She was so persistent in refining it that she had even forgotten to eat and sleep. She was on the verge of going crazy. Finally, half a month later, when she saw the 2 brown origin longevity pills with floating pill veins, she finally revealed a relieved and happy smile. It's finally done. 3rd level life essence pills, improved life essence pills. A 3rd level life essence pill can increase one's lifespan by 3 years. I've finally refined them. Her eyes shone with joy as she hurriedly recorded the refining method. After putting away the 2 life essence pills, she walked out of the alchemy room. She planned to return to the courtyard to wash her clothes, which she hadn't changed for a long time, when she saw the old man sweeping the fallen leaves not far away. Her eyes moved slightly and she walked towards him. When she arrived in front of him, she took out a bottle from her space and said, "This is the life essence pill I refined. Take it." Saying so, she stuffed the bottle into his hand and left. The old man's lowered gaze moved slightly. He looked at the bottle in his hand and slowly lifted his head to look at the dirty figure who had turned around and left. He pursed his lips slightly and just stood there quietly. He poured out the medicinal pills from the bottle and remained silent for a long time. Feng Jiu went back and reorganized herself. Because she came here to cultivate in seclusion, she didn't even bring Lung Shuang with her, so she had to do some things herself. After taking a bath, she looked at her black hair in the mirror and couldn't help shaking her head and chuckling, 2 life essence pills and you're already like this. You're really in a sorry state. Sure enough, life essence pills can't be compared to medicines. Their medicinal effects are outstanding and refining them isn't that simple. She sighed. After trimming her hair, she drank a bottle of medicine and fell asleep on the bed. This sleep lasted for 2 days and 2 nights. In the end, she woke up from hunger and got up. Chapter 617. The old man glanced at her and returned to the kitchen. Not long after, he came out with a bowl of porridge and placed it in front of her. At the same time, he moved the small dot in front of her and continued to eat without saying anything. Feng Jiu was slightly surprised when she saw this. She walked forward and sat down. Looking at the bowl of porridge in front of her, there was a green lotus seed in the middle and it emitted a lotus fragrance. For me? The old man did not reply. Fengjiu did not wait for him to reply and ate 2 mouthfuls of porridge with a spoon. When she scooped up the green lotus seed, she looked at it and asked, "This lotus seed is not ripe yet, right? Why does it have such a strong lotus fragrance?" As she spoke, she put the green lotus seed into her mouth and chewed. She frowned. It is indeed not ripe, and it is very hard to chew it open. She chewed a few times in her mouth, but she really could not chew it open. However, the lotus seed's fragrance was really strong. Hence, she smiled and said, "It's really fragrant. If you can't chew it open, just swallow it. Don't waste it." Hearing this, the old man looked up and saw her swallow the lotus seed. His eyes moved slightly and he continued to eat the porridge in front of him without saying anything. Fengjiu scooped around in the porridge and asked, "Why is there only 1 lotus seed?" Although the lotus seed was hard to chew, there was only 1 in this bowl of porridge. Wasn't that too little? She still wanted to eat a few more. The old man's hand that was scooping the porridge paused. He did not raise his head and said, "1 is enough." As he spoke, he finished the porridge and tidied up the things in front of him. He turned and went into the kitchen. Not long after, he came out and left without saying a word. Fengjiu held her chin with one hand and looked at the old man's back as he walked away. She blinked and whispered, "It's only the middle of 3 months, there are already lotus seeds. However, this lotus seed's fragrance is really good. I wonder what kind it is." She ate a few more mouthfuls of porridge. The lotus seed's fragrance in her mouth spread on the tip of her tongue, leaving a rich aftertaste. After filling her stomach, she returned to her courtyard to cultivate. The matter of swallowing the green lotus seed, which was emitting a rich fragrance, was quickly forgotten by her. As time passed, the day of enrollment for the School of Stars and Clouds was getting closer and closer. On this day, after she gave some instructions to the few ghost cultivators who were cultivating in the Peach Blossom Cove, she also gave some instructions to the old man who was sweeping the floor. The general idea was that she would be leaving for the Green Soaring Kingdom's 6-star academy, Star Cloud Academy, to cultivate, and would not be back in a short period of time. So she asked them to take care of this place before returning to the Imperial Palace. After arranging everything, she spoke with her family in the main hall for a while and listened to their advice and instructions. "Xiao Ju, aren't you going to bring anyone with you this time? If he went to the 6-star academy alone, how could he not have someone by his side? Why don't we transfer Leng Shuang from the Phoenix Guard Battalion to go with you?" "No need, no need. Let her stay in the Phoenix Guard Battalion to cultivate. I will go back to the academy alone. When I get there, there will be arrangements." She smiled and waved her hand, saying, "If there is anything, just send me a letter." Lin sent a letter saying that he is outside with the mercenaries. When the time comes, he will go directly to the School of Stars and Clouds and will not come back. "Then, won't you be going alone?" The old man looked at her with some worry. Although her strength was outstanding, but the people in the School of Stars and Clouds were all elite disciples from different countries. Each one of them had amazing talent. How could she go alone without someone to look after her? Chapter 618. 3 days later, on a mountain road outside the city of Enchanting Kingdom, the handsome Feng Juqi, who was dressed in a red robe, sat on the back of Laro Bai. He was obviously a handsome and elegant young man, who exuded an air of nobility from head to toe, but he gave off an unrestrained and lazy aura. One of her legs hung naturally by Laro Bai's side, while the other was curled up on Laro Bai's back. She held a strand of dog's tail grass in her mouth as she leisurely walked towards the city. There was a flying ship for long-distance travel, so the journey wouldn't take too long. After bidding farewell to her family, she once again set foot on the territory of Enchanting Kingdom. Riding on Old White, she walked leisurely towards Star Cloud City, where the College of Stars and Clouds was located. Star Cloud City was a city located at the northernmost part of Enchanting Kingdom. Behind it was the most dangerous place in Enchanting Kingdom, the Black Sand Forest. Although Star Cloud City belonged to Enchanting Kingdom, it was not under the jurisdiction of the royal family of Enchanting Kingdom. However, it was also the most prosperous city in Enchanting Kingdom. The clans that were able to take root in Starcloud City were all big clans that even the royal family of Enchanting Kingdom had to show respect to. This was also the intersection of the various countries. As the College of Stars and Clouds was a 6-star academy, even the big clans and powers here did not dare to offend them. This was because they were only a branch of the College of Stars and Clouds. The foundation of the College of Stars and Clouds was so big that no clan could go against it. She was looking forward to the College of Stars and Clouds. Along the way into the city, she paid the entrance fee and allowed Old White to walk on his own, leisurely shuttling through the city. TSK, as expected of Starcloud City. This place is even more prosperous than Da Yang's Three River City. She clicked her tongue and murmured softly. She looked at the people coming and going on the wide street. Spirit beast carriages shuttled through the streets, and there were many young people like her, riding on the backs of spirit beasts. On both sides of the street, shops stood in great numbers. At the beginning and end of the alley, hawkers set up stalls and shouted loudly. There were even people who were trading and bargaining, arguing until their faces and ears turned red. Young master, young master. Someone was shouting, but Feng Ju ignored it. She looked around from time to time, and she heard that the voice was still rising. That young master in red riding a white horse, look here, look here. A young master in red riding a white horse. Ha! She lowered her head to look at the red robe on her body, took out the dog's tail grass from her mouth, and looked up in the direction of the voice. She saw a skinny teenager of 14 or 15 years old standing in front of a shop, waving at her with a smile on his face. He carried a small wooden box in front of his chest, and she didn't know what he was selling. At this time, he was busy selling things and collecting money. She raised her eyebrows and pointed at herself. "You're calling me?" "Right, right." The skinny young man hurriedly nodded in response. He smiled at the person who bought the item and said that he would come again next time. Then, he hurriedly ran over to her. "Young master, are you from another city? Are you familiar with the city? Do you need someone to lead the way? I'm very familiar with Starcloud City. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to know the most beautiful scenery? Where do you want to know the most comfortable inn? Where do you want to know the most unique street food? I know everything." Perhaps it was because he often basked in the sun, the skinny young man's skin was dark, but his eyes were bright and full of spirit. He gave people a feeling of shrewdness and flexibility. Chapter 619. Hearing this, the young man grinned under the sunlight, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. "Not much, 10 silver coins is enough." Thus, Fengjiu took out 10 silver coins and handed it to him, then followed the young man around Starcloud City. The young man led the old horse as he explained some things about Starcloud City, including which family's master was the most powerful in the city and should not be provoked, which family's young master was the most outstanding, and which family's young master was the most beautiful. Starcloud City gathers the most of all places, and it is divided into 4 major cities: East, West, North, and South. The East has the Black Market, the West has the Pharmacist Guild, the South has the largest auction house, and the North has the Mercenary Guild. Young master, in Starcloud City, other than those aristocratic families, you must not provoke these 4 powers either. As the young man spoke, he occasionally turned back to look at the red-robed young man sitting on the horse. He saw that the red-robed young man was playing with the dog's tail grass in his hand, looking around curiously. It was unknown if the red-robed young man was listening to him. Seeing this, he continued, "If we're talking about the inns to stay in, then Starcloud City is." Before he could finish, he saw a luxurious beast carriage speeding towards them. He quickly pulled Laro by to the side to prevent it from colliding with the spirit beast carriage in front. Fengjiu looked over and saw the 4 spirit beasts pulling the carriage side by side. They looked like horses, but they were not horses. They looked a little like rhinoceroses, and they galloped on the crowded street without slowing down, causing the people on the street to cry out in alarm and avoid them. In the midst of the panic, a child standing in front of a sugar figurine with his finger in his mouth looked at the vendor who was making sugar figurines. However, when the vendor saw the 4 spirit beast carriages galloping towards them, he was so shocked that he hurriedly dragged his stall behind. The child with his finger in his mouth wanted to follow, but he was knocked down by a running commoner, and his small body rolled onto the street. Seeing the spirit beast carriages galloping towards them, and seeing the crying child who was unaware of the danger, the surrounding commoners gasped and cried out in alarm. Hiss! That spirit beast carriage did not stop. That child is still in the middle of the street. Whose child is that? At this moment, a woman ran out of a shop. When she saw the child on the street, she was so shocked that her face turned pale. My child. She ran over, but the spirit beast carriage was much faster than her. Feng Ju, who sat on Senior White's back, couldn't help but frown when she saw that the spirit beast carriage didn't stop, and the driver was actually waving his whip and shouting anxiously as if he didn't take that life seriously. She was just about to fly up and take the child away when she saw a light blue and graceful figure flash down from the 2nd floor of a restaurant. In just the blink of an eye, the child was rescued by that person. She brought the child to the child's mother and seemed to tell her something. The woman nodded and thanked the woman gratefully. The spirit beast carriage sped past without stopping, only stirring up a cloud of dust on the road. Everyone's heart skipped a beat as they watched the young woman save the child. They couldn't help but cheer out loud. So fast. Cheers and praises rang out. The crowd's gazes also landed on the young woman in a dress. When they saw the woman's face clearly, they could not help but be stunned. There were even people who recognized the woman and cried out in pleasant surprise. Chapter 620. At this moment, a beautiful woman in a white dress quickly walked down from the restaurant. She walked up to Yi Jing worriedly and complained, "Ah Jing, you scared me to death. How could you just jump down from the 2nd floor like that?" That beast carriage was moving so fast and there were 4 beasts traveling together. What would have happened if you had been half a step slower and got hit? Yi Jing revealed a gentle smile, "I won't. I saw that I could save him. That's why I jumped down from the 2nd floor. I know what I'm doing and won't hurt him. Moreover, that child's situation was also very dangerous." Yes, yes, yes. You only care about others and don't worry about yourself. You scared me so much that I broke out in cold sweat. The woman in white continued to scold her. She looked her up and down and said, "Are you really not hurt?" She lightly shook her head and smiled, "I'm not hurt." "It's good that you're not hurt. You see, you've been in the limelight the moment you stepped out of the academy's gates. You really are one of our academy's top 10 geniuses, Yi Jing." The woman in white joked. Yi Jing smiled and said, "Let's go." "Okay." The woman in white replied. She held her hand and they left together under the gaze of the crowd. Feng Jiu rubbed her chin and watched the beauty's figure gradually disappear into the distance. From her point of view, that Yi Jing was indeed a rare beauty. The way she jumped down from the 2nd floor was also very good. It could be seen that not only was her appearance outstanding, even her cultivation was not ordinary. The Academy of Stars and Clouds' top 10 geniuses? Yes, it really made people look forward to it. Ah, it's actually Yi Jing. I didn't expect to see her here. She's my goddess. The tanned youth who was holding White's hand excitedly looked at the beauty who was already far away. Because of his excitement, he didn't even realize that the rope was loosened. Feng Jiu also didn't notice. Looking at the tanned youth's excited expression, she couldn't help but laugh. Just as she was about to use the green foxtail in her hand to call him back to reality, she saw White's nose snort out 2 breaths. It excitedly kicked its hooves and actually started to chase after the beauty Yi Jing. "White, what are you doing?" Feng Jiu's face was filled with astonishment. She was originally sitting with one leg bent when Larobai galloped wildly, and she almost fell off the horse's back. Fortunately, she hurriedly adjusted her sitting position and clamped her legs tightly around Larobai's abdomen. Even so, under Larobai's mad galloping, she could only rely on her legs clamped tightly around Larobai's abdomen to stabilize herself. She was almost thrown off several times. "Old Bai, stop." As she drank, The horse's rope fell in front of her and she couldn't grab it with her hands. Moreover, Larobai was excitedly jumping and twisting the horse's hips. No matter how she shouted, it wouldn't stop. She was sitting on Larobai, who was jumping and twisting all over the place, and her butt hurt. Just as she was bending down slightly to try and grab the rope, she saw Larobai, who was running wildly, suddenly stop. It didn't matter if it stopped, but at the same time, the force and momentum of its running caused her to fall forward fiercely. When Yijing and the white-clothed woman heard the commotion behind them, they stopped and turned around to look. But when they looked, the two of them couldn't help but be startled. They saw that the white horse was still jumping and twisting its hips as it ran. The red-clothed youth sitting on the horse's back was shaken to the point that he swayed and almost fell off a few times. Chapter 621. Yijing stared in astonishment at the young man in red who was flung away. She couldn't react in time and only felt her mind go blank. Her body instinctively retreated step by step in an attempt to avoid him. However, she didn't know why she stepped on her skirt while retreating. She lost her balance and fell backwards. Before she could stabilize her body, she was violently knocked to the ground by the young man in red who had pounced on her. Ah! Two muffled groans could be heard from the surrounding crowd. In an instant, the surrounding crowd was stunned. They stared in astonishment at the young man in red who had pushed Yijing to the ground. Fengjiu was flung away, but he didn't feel the pain of falling to the ground. Beneath him, there was something soft and there was a faint fragrance of a woman. Just as he was about to get up, he felt that something wasn't right. It was as if his hands were holding onto something soft. He couldn't help but move his palms and pinch it. In that instant, gasps could be heard from all around, accompanied by cries of surprise. She didn't even have time to think about what the soft and springy feeling in her palm was. Just as she raised her head, she met the stunned and startled face of the young girl beneath her. He looked at the beautiful young girl on top of him and remembered her actions of saving the child. He smiled and said, "Okay." Before he could finish his sentence, he saw the face of the person beneath him turn from pale to red. In anger and embarrassment, she raised her hand to slap Fengjiu. At the same time, she scolded, "Pervert. Hey, don't hit me." Fengjiu naturally raised his hand to block the slap. He changed from pouncing on the young girl to sitting between her waist and abdomen. When he sat up, he realized that he had been grabbed and pinched a few times in his palms. He felt a familiar soft touch. It was actually the softest and most voluptuous breast of the girl beneath him. For a moment, she was also stunned and dumbfounded. No wonder the girl's face was red with embarrassment and anger. Could it be that the surrounding gasps and cries of surprise were heard? She actually pounced on the top 10 prodigy of the School of Stars and Clouds, a beauty called Yijing, in front of so many people. She even acted like a hooligan and touched and pinched the girl's voluptuous bosom in front of so many people. This. I didn't do it on purpose. She quickly jumped up and shouted. She even felt guilty and didn't dare to fight with the girl. The lady in white seemed to have recovered from her shock, as she pointed angrily at Fengjiu and barked, "You pervert. You actually dared to touch her on the street. You. Do you know that she is one of the top 10 prodigies of the Star Cloud realm, Yijing? It would have been better if she didn't say anything." Once she did, some of the people around who didn't know Yijing exclaimed in surprise. "Hiss. So she's Yijing. She's one of the 10 prodigies of the Star Cloud realm. Besides her looks, her cultivation isn't bad either. Who would have thought that she would be taken advantage of by that young man on the street?" For a moment, discussions broke out everywhere. Everyone looked at the woman who stood up from the ground with reddened eyes. She was embarrassed and angry. However, Fengjiu didn't look at Yijing, who stood up. Instead, he glanced at the woman in white who helped Yijing up. "Pervert. I'll kill you." After all, she was only a 16-year-old girl. Even though she had a gentle personality, she had never been humiliated in such a way. Her eyes turned red and mist gathered in her eyes. She waved her hand and attacked the red-clothed young man who had retreated to the side. Chapter 622. Fengjiu quickly jumped away and retreated step by step to avoid the attack. Seeing that the girl called Yi Jing was so embarrassed and angry, and being pointed at and gossiped about by the people around her, she felt extremely apologetic. Even though she was a girl, she was now wearing men's clothing. In the eyes of others, she was a man who took advantage of a girl. No matter what, she was in the wrong. Because she saw that this girl called Yi Jing had saved the child and her aura was very gentle, she somewhat admired this Yi Jing. However, seeing that she was so embarrassed and angry that her eyes were red and she was holding back her tears, she felt extremely apologetic. Therefore, when she dodged, she slowed down a little and was hit by the palm without leaving a trace and was sent rolling to the ground. In reality, she was not hurt at all because Yi Jing was angry and embarrassed. Her palm did not move at all, as if she wanted to hit her to vent her anger. Therefore, she beat her at her own game and went along with her plan. Hiss. Don't hit me, I really didn't do it on purpose. She was kicked and rolled to the ground. Her red clothes rolled on the ground and were covered in dust. She waved her hands and shouted in panic. After standing up, she ran to chase after Yi Jing again. Her sorry appearance amused the people who were pointing at Yi Jing and gossiping, and they could not help but laugh. Look at that young man, he's been beaten so badly. Serves him right, who told him to take advantage of a girl? That's right, he should be beaten up to vent his anger. Look at that young man's horse, like master, like horse. It's still swaying its hips, wagging its tail, and drooling. That's right, I saw it too. That horse was even jumping and wagging its hips as it ran. What a strange horse, I can't tell its breed. Heh, seeing its master get beaten up, it's still so excited. How funny. When she heard the people pointing at Yi Jing and talking about her and Laro Bai, Fengjiu ran back to Laro Bai's side in panic and pulled Laro Bai, who was still drooling and smiling at Yi Jing, away. Quick, Laro Bai, run. She pulled with all her strength, but it was as if she could not pull him away. Her face was red with anxiety and panic. When she saw Yi Jing chasing after her and swinging a palm at her, she jumped up in shock and cried out involuntarily. It's coming again. Don't hit me again, I really didn't do it on purpose. As she cried out, she hid by Laro Bai's side. When Laro Bai saw the beauty chasing after him, he opened his mouth and saliva flowed out again. He snorted and stuck out his tongue to lick the woman's face. Yi Jing saw that the youth was in a sorry state and hiding beside the horse with a frightened expression. After she calmed down, she knew that the youth had been flung away by the horse. However, whenever she thought of how the red-clothed youth had touched her, she felt extremely ashamed and angry. But now that she had vented her anger, she calmed down a bit. She also saw that the young man had taken quite a bit of beating from her, so her anger had dissipated quite a bit. She also saw that strange and perverted horse sticking its tongue out at her. She immediately took a step back in fright and glared angrily at the red-clothed young man. Don't let me see you again. Fengjiu blinked innocently and poked his head out. He saw Laro Bai pulling the white-clothed woman away quickly, then lowered his head to look at his sorry figure. He could not help but shake his head and laugh. He sighed softly and patted Laro Bai's head, then twisted his ear. Chapter 623. Hiss. Laro Bai lowered his front hooves and wagged his rear buttocks. With his ears pinched, he didn't dare to escape. He could only whine in a low voice, trying to appease his master's anger. The dark-skinned young man, who was already dumbstruck, ran over. He looked at the intelligent strange horse and then looked at the young man in red who was covered in dust. He moved his mouth but didn't know what to say. Next time, if you dare to get too excited when you see a beauty, I will castrate you. Fengjiu lowered his voice and whispered into Laro Bai's ear. His voice was cold and full of warning. When Laro Bai heard this, he immediately became listless. He didn't dare to move his wagging rear anymore. He laid down on the ground and whined in a low voice. Me. Fengjiu grunted coldly before releasing her hand that was twisting its ear, and then she flicked off the dust on her body before she glanced at the young man that stood blankly at the side and said, "Which one did you say wasn't bad? Where is it? Lead the way." Oh, yes, yes. It's not far ahead. Young master, please follow me. The young man came back to his senses and hurriedly said. Seeing that the young master in red was leading the horse himself, he led the way. Previously, when he saw that the young master in red was unrestrained and lazy, he thought that he was a young master from an aristocratic family. He must have come to enroll in the school of stars and clouds. However, when he saw the scene just now, he immediately overturned that possibility. The young master in red was handsome and outstanding. He had been in Star Cloud City for many years and had never seen a man who could compare to his handsome appearance. However, the scene of him being beaten to the point of covering his head and scurrying away like a rat really made him lose his image. He didn't expect that such a noble young master would end up in such a sorry state. He reckoned that even in his family, he was just an ignorant and incompetent hedonistic young master. Young master, this is the place. The dark-skinned youth brought Fengjiu to the front of the magnificent inn and said, this inn is famous in the eastern part of the city. It's quite spacious inside, and there's also a courtyard where the people of the inn can drink tea and chat. It's quite comfortable to live inside, but the price is also quite expensive. Millimeter, Fengjiu responded and glanced at the inn. Seeing the guest, the waiter inside came out to greet him. Young master, are you staying at an inn? Please come in. Keep an eye on my mount. She handed the reins to the waiter and then said to the tanned youth, you can go back. I don't need you to lead the way. Right now, she just wanted to take a bath and have a good rest. The dark-skinned young man scratched his head in embarrassment. Then these 10 silver coins. He had only led the way for a short while and explained some things. It didn't seem right to take 10 silver coins from him. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and waved his hand. It's yours. After saying that, she was about to walk into the inn. However, at this moment, the dark-skinned young man handed something over. She glanced sideways and saw the young man smiling embarrassedly. This is the map of Star Cloud City. I drew it and sold it. This, I'll give you a copy. As he spoke, he stuffed the map into Fengjiu's hands and quickly ran away. Chapter 624. After bathing, Fengjiu entered the space. In the space, besides the little fire phoenix, there was also the cloud-swallowing beast. Ever since the cloud-swallowing beast was placed in the space by Fengjiu to accompany the little fire phoenix, its original arrogance had been worn away. In front of an ancient mythical beast, even if it had evolved into a mythical beast, it still had to be obedient as a pet. When Fengjiu entered the space and saw the little fire phoenix cultivating, she was slightly surprised. Why was this little thing cultivating so obediently? She thought it was eating ginseng in the space again. She didn't expect that this time, it would cultivate in the space without her saying anything. Seeing this, she sat cross-legged in the space and glanced at the cloud-swallowing beast that was obediently lying on the side. She hooked her finger and said, "Come here." When the cloud-swallowing beast saw this, it hurriedly got up and walked over to her, trying to please her. "Were you bullied by little fire in here?" She touched the fluffy fur of the cloud-swallowing beast and asked with a smile. When the cloud-swallowing beast heard this, it looked at the little figure that was cultivating and said, "Master, can I go out and accompany Old White?" Although the space was full of spiritual energy, the pressure of the ancient mythical beast was too strong. It was always on tenterhooks and couldn't cultivate well. Hearing this, Fengjiu glanced at it and said, "Old White just caused me trouble. If you go out, there will be more trouble for the two of us." She stood up and said, "Cultivate well." In order to prevent it from talking, Fengjiu directly exited the space. She sighed and shook her head. "All of them are troublesome." She didn't leave the room, but slept in the room. She didn't leave the inn until the sky gradually darkened. She walked around the place on the map and returned to the inn to rest late at night. However, she didn't sleep after returning, but sat cross-legged on the bed to cultivate. However, when she tried to circulate her spiritual energy, she found that the spiritual energy in her body was rapidly disappearing, as if it was being absorbed by something. She couldn't condense her spiritual energy. How could this be? Her expression changed slightly and she frowned. She didn't believe it and continued to adjust her spiritual power. However, after trying a few times, she couldn't gather the spiritual power in her body, let alone circulate it. For this reason, she directly entered the space and sat cross-legged to cultivate. However, when she absorbed the rich spiritual power in the space and gathered it in her body, it strangely disappeared. She tried several times in a row, but it was the same. How could this be? She was a little startled. She checked her pulse, but there wasn't any problem. She also tried to use her profound energy aura. Profound energy could also be condensed, but the moment the spiritual energy aura entered her body, it seemed to be absorbed by something. It was like a bottomless pit, disappearing without a trace. Could it be the dantian? But that doesn't make sense. She muttered softly and tried to calm her heart. After stabilizing her breathing, she relaxed her body and closed her eyes. She used her primordial spirit to probe her dantian. However, when she saw her dantian, she could not help but open her eyes in astonishment. Her face was filled with disbelief. How could that be? How could it be that green lotus seed? In her dantian, there was a green lotus seed quietly lying there. She recognized it at a glance. It was the green lotus seed on the lotus porridge that the old man in the Peach Blossom Cove had brought her that day. Chapter 625. She had a strange look on her face as she sat in a daze, feeling incredulous and strange. Why was she unable to digest the thing she had eaten? It had even run into her dantian. It had even absorbed the spiritual energy from within her body. What kind of lotus seed was that? If she had not been so far away, she would have run back and asked that old man where he had found that lotus seed for her to eat. If she had not digested it, it would have been delayed in her dantian. The cloud-swallowing beast lay obediently on one side as its eyes darted around. It stared at its master who had a strange look on her face but did not dare to disturb her. It watched as she suddenly came in and sat there cross-legged to cultivate. Then, she sat there in a daze for a while. Then, she got up and went to the place where the books were placed. She found an ancient book and took the book out in a flash. That night, Fengjiu spent the entire night searching for information in her room. She flipped through the ancient books and read everything related to lotus seeds. In the end, she only managed to find some small details about the Chaos Green Lotus at the back of an ancient book. The Chaos Green Lotus? That can't be, right? She was a little dumbfounded. Compared to the small details about the Chaos Green Lotus recorded in the ancient book, she had heard of the legend of the Chaos Green Lotus as the Order Master of the Secret Order in her past life. However, she had always thought that it was just a legend, much less the Chaos Green Lotus lying in her dantian. She reached out and touched her dantian as she murmured with a strange look on her face, "If this really is the Chaos Green Lotus, then I've really picked up a great treasure. However, that Chaos Green Lotus is in my dantian and has absorbed spiritual energy. Could it be that I need to nourish it with spiritual energy?" She thought about it in her room for a long time. Even though she only had a few clues, at least she knew the reason why the spiritual energy in her body had dissipated. She knew that even if the Chaos Green Lotus in her dantian was not the Chaos Green Lotus, it would not cause any harm to her body. However, she did not know how long she would need to nourish this Chaos Green Lotus before it would sprout. With this thought and curiosity in mind, she originally wanted to walk around Star Cloud City. However, because of the green lotus in her dantian, she locked herself in the inn and entered the space day and night to cultivate her spiritual power and aura. It was as if she wanted to see how much spiritual power and aura could nourish the green lotus to germinate. However, with the passage of time, day after day, it was already the third day before the College of Stars and Clouds began to enroll students. The green lotus in her dantian still did not have the slightest change. Once the spiritual energy that she cultivated entered her body, it disappeared without a trace. Early in the morning, she finally collected her thoughts and walked out of her room. She walked around the public courtyard of the inn for a while before sitting down at the stone table. Her finger tapped on the table from time to time. No one knew what she was thinking. Little brother, are you also here to register for the School of Stars and Clouds? A laughing voice sounded. Fengju came back to her senses and looked up. She saw an imposing man dressed in green walk out of the room next to hers. With one hand behind his back and the other in front of him, he walked towards her. There was a strange smile in his eyes that she could not understand. Yes. She nodded and asked with a smile, Brother, are you here too? Yes. The expectations of the elders in my family, I had to come. He laughed loudly and sat down beside Fengju. His eyes were smiling as he looked at Fengju. I've stayed here for a while. I didn't expect to meet little brother here. Brother Xiao, don't tease me anymore. She shook her head with a smile. All right, I'm just joking with you. Look, this is the restaurant. It's quite famous in the East City. If you're late, there won't be any seats left. As he spoke, he walked inside and said, Come with me. Seeing this, Fengju walked in and heard the waiter telling him that there were no more private rooms, only private rooms on the second floor. All right then, I'll take a private room. Xiao Yihan waved his hand and said to Fengju, Little brother Feng, there are no more private rooms, only private rooms. You won't mind, right? Of course not. She said with a smile and walked with him to the private rooms on the second floor. Chapter 627. Hearing this, Fengju smiled. Brother Xiao's knowledge is extraordinary. To be able to travel together with Brother Xiao, I am more than happy to do so. Speaking of which, there were still 3 days until the day of the examination. She wondered if her brother had reached Star Cloud City yet. Haha, little brother Feng, as long as you pass the examination, I will take care of you in the academy. He laughed loudly and poured a cup of wine for Fengju. Come, let's drink to our acquaintance. Seeing this, Fengju raised his cup, smiled slightly, and drank it all in one gulp. Come, let's eat. He called out with a joyful smile on his face, as if he was happy to have made a good friend. Thus, the two of them chatted as they ate in the restaurant. After 2 hours, Fengju, who had eaten quite a bit of wine, stood up and said, Brother Xiao, please eat first. I will go and relieve myself. Haha, go. Let the waiter bring you there, in case you can't find the place. Thus, he waved his hand and called for the waiter, Bring my brother to relieve himself. Young master, please. The waiter of the restaurant was full of smiles as he bowed slightly and led the way for Fengju. They walked down the first floor and went to the back. After the waiter pointed the way for Fengju, he left. When Fengju arrived at the back of the first floor, he only went to the washroom to wash his face. That Xiao Yihan was really too good at drinking. Being able to drink was one thing, but he could still find a bunch of words to toast to her. Although her alcohol tolerance was not bad, drinking like that was really too much for her. Thus, she used the excuse of relieving herself to wash her face and relax. Go, I am not drunk. I don't need you to help me. A drunken voice was heard. After washing her face, she turned around and saw a slightly drunk man in luxurious clothes stagger in with the help of a waiter. She glanced at him and then withdrew her gaze. She took out a handkerchief to wipe the water on her hands and prepared to go back. However, after the slightly drunk man pushed the waiter away, he narrowed his drunken eyes and saw a red-clothed fairy slowly walking towards him. Under the influence of alcohol, he could only see that the fairy was so beautiful that it could move one's soul. He couldn't help but reach out his hand to touch the fairy's face and murmur infatuatedly, Fairy. Fengju frowned slightly and avoided the hand that reached out to her. She glanced at the man unhappily. Seeing that he was drunk, she did not argue with him and was about to walk out. Unexpectedly, the slightly drunk man laughed and pounced on her with his slightly swaying figure. He grabbed her waist and hugged her. Seeing this, she lifted her leg without thinking and kicked the person who pounced on her to the ground. She said to the waiter who was standing at the side, not knowing what to do, help this drunk customer back. Yes, yes. Chapter 628. Unable to bear it any longer, she smiled and squatted down to look at the luxuriously dressed man holding her leg. She patted his head and said, "Be good, let go." The man looked at her with infatuation, his eyes blurred. "Fairy, so beautiful." Hearing those soft words and feeling the fairy's hand gently patting his head, he grinned foolishly and at the same time, released the hand that was hugging her leg. "Do you see that water jar?" She revealed a charming smile and pointed at the water jar to the side. She didn't know if it was because he was drunk or because he was mesmerized by her smile, but the luxuriously dressed man nodded dumbly on the ground and said, I see it. You reek of alcohol, go in and wash up." She said with a smile and then added, "I'm not leaving, I'll wait for you here." Hearing this, the luxuriously dressed man's eyes lit up. "Really? I'll go wash up, fairy, don't leave." As he spoke, he quickly stood up and jumped into the water jar with a plop. When his body soaked in the cool water, his drunkenness dissipated and he instantly sobered up. The water jar was very big and only the head of the luxuriously dressed man was exposed. At this moment, his entire body was covered in cool water. He sat in the water jar and stared at the red-clothed young man standing in front of him. After sobering up, he naturally wouldn't mistake the red-clothed young man for a woman. Especially the young man's eyebrows, which were wanton and devilish, was not something a woman should have. However, that handsome face was truly unforgettable. It was no wonder that he mistook the young man for a fairy in his drunken state. Thinking about how he had fallen to the ground and held onto the young man's leg without letting go, even though he was also a man, his face couldn't help but turn red after sobering up. His expression was slightly embarrassed. Young master, I'm really sorry. I was drunk and mistook young master for a woman." His eyes wandered around and he was too embarrassed to look at the young man. Hearing this, Fengjiu raised her eyebrows and a trace of surprise flashed through her eyes. She didn't expect the luxuriously dressed man to apologize after sobering up. Seeing this, she didn't continue to harp on it. After all, she had also teased him. Thus, he only glanced at the man and said, "If you can't drink, then drink less. You're lucky to have met me today. Otherwise, I wouldn't have just let you jump into the water tank." As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his robe and walked away. Hearing this, the man sitting in the water jar looked embarrassed. However, when he thought of the red-clothed young man squatting in front of him and whispering those words to him and patting him on the head, his expression, once again. When his friend and the shopkeeper rushed over, they only saw the luxuriously dressed man sitting in the water tank in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking, but even his ears were red. However, when they asked him, he said that it was nothing and that it was just a misunderstanding. Thus, the matter quietly calmed down. Fengjiu returned to the second floor and saw that Xiao Yihan was still drinking. She couldn't help but shake her head. "Brother Xiao, drinking too much is harmful to the body. Don't drink too much." She came to the table and sat down. After walking around, she was no longer in the mood to eat and drink. "Little brother Feng, there are very few people who can compare to your elder brother's alcohol tolerance. I didn't expect that you, who looked so weak, could drink with me for so long without getting drunk. Your alcohol tolerance is not ordinary." Chapter 629. The comical person who covered his head and scurried away like a rat on the streets, the person who sat quietly in the courtyard of the inn, the carefree and unrestrained manner at the table, the calm and noble aura in his actions, made him somewhat unable to understand what kind of person he was. However, the only thing he was certain of was that this young man was the first person he admired after coming to Star Cloud City, and also the first person he wanted to befriend. "Little brother Feng, you know that person?" As he spoke, Xiao Yihan gestured. His gaze fell on the man who was completely drenched. He saw that the other party was in a sorry state, But his eyes hurriedly moved away when he saw Fengjiu, but couldn't help but look over again. It was really strange. Fengjiu glanced at that person, and saw that person hurriedly move his gaze away and hurriedly go to the side room. Not long after, he changed into a clean set of clothes and came out. When he went downstairs, his footsteps paused, and he even cupped his hands in salute to her, then hurriedly left. "I don't know him," she said half a beat later. Seeing that he wasn't eating, Xiao Yihan called for the waiter to settle the bill, then walked out of the inn with Fengjiu, saying, "Little brother Feng, it's still early now. How about we go to the black market to watch a few fights? I heard that the fights in the black market are the fiercest. I've wanted to see it for a long time." "Ha ha ha, then let's go." He laughed heartily, and went to the black market with Fengjiu. Entering the black market didn't require money, but entering the arena to watch the fights required a viewing fee. Thus, when Xiao Yihan was about to pay the fee, Fengjiu had already passed it to him. While he was slightly stunned, she smiled and walked in. Seeing this, Xiao Yihan smiled and followed in. The moment he stepped into the battle arena, he immediately felt that the atmosphere inside was different from outside. Other than the spectators who were excitedly cheering from the surrounding spectators, there was a faint smell of blood in the air. The fighting spirit and aura of the two people fighting on the battle stage formed a battlefield. The fierce fighting and attacks were accompanied by blood and sweat, causing the blood of the people in the arena to boil. The two of them were led to the front seats by the person who led them here, and sat down to watch the fight on the battle stage. "Young masters, do you want to place a bet? You can still place bets now." A middle-aged man came over with a tray. Fengjiu glanced at the tray. There were two signs, one black and one red, indicating that the minimum bet was 100 silver coins. 500 gold coins on the red team to win, Xiao Yihan said to the middle-aged man, then looked at Fengjiu. Fengjiu shook his head and smiled. "I don't really play this game." Thus, as the middle-aged man retreated, he ordered people to bring 2 cups of tea and a portion of pastries to the two people sitting in the same row. The stage was drenched in sweat and blood, while the audience was overjoyed. Looking at the swollen faces and broken arms of both sides, Fengjiu's eyes darkened. He was risking his life to earn that pitiful amount of hard-earned money. She could hear the cheers of the crowd, but the blood on the stage was splashed with blood. Looking at the strong contrast between the stage and the audience, her heart sank. "Brother Xiao, please watch. I have something to do," she stood up and said. She found a person from the black market to lead the way to the manager, intending to ask if there was any news of her brother in the black market. "You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.